Hi there, my name is Cassandra Sampson, and I am a registered dietitian and a licensed dietitian nutritionist, and I'm also a mindful and instinctive eating practitioner. And today I'm going to talk to you about nutrition for longevity because I feel like that is going to relate to everybody on this earth. We always want to live longer, and I'm going to hopefully help you understand how to do that. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, I thought that it might be fun to do a little bit of nutrition trivia just to kind of test our knowledge, see where we're at, and then we can move on from there. So let's start by guessing the food. Your first clue is this is the only non-animal source of vitamin D. Our second clue, this particular food absorbs the flavor that you cook it with, making it a very versatile food, one that I recommend. And the third clue is that it is part of the fungi family. Dun, 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 drum roll, please. Mushrooms, you guessed it. If you got that one, you got 1 point. Let's go on to the next one. Which has more sodium, celery or asparagus? You might be thinking, I didn't think either of them had sodium, but today we're going to learn which one has sodium, which one has more sodium. Celery. Celery has a lot more sodium than asparagus does. And this is naturally before we're adding any type of, spices or salt to it. And finally, which has more vitamin C? So this is broccoli or an orange. Although the orange kind of looks like it's an egg yolk, it's actually an orange. So which one do you think has more vitamin C? So when we're feeling a little under the weather and we need our immune system to kick it up a notch, we should go for, look at that, broccoli. Broccoli actually has a little bit more vitamin C per serving than an orange, which not many people know that. So one medium stalk of broccoli should be on the menu if you're not feeling your best today. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears and get a little bit more serious with our nutrition trivia at this point. So unhealthy diets are associated with 1 in how many deaths worldwide? Is it 1 in 100, 1 in 10, 1 in 5, or 1 in 3 deaths worldwide? The answer is 1 in 5. So unfortunately, an unhealthy diet is associated with 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. So why does good nutrition matter? Why does it matter to put in the effort and the time and the finances to eat a healthy diet and make healthier food choices and just live a healthier lifestyle? It matters because 1 in 5 deaths worldwide is the equivalent of 11 million deaths a year. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in both men and women. And I think the good news is that the risk can greatly be decreased by following a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle. So the way that we're choosing to live regarding our diet, the way that we eat, how much we eat, when we eat, and as well as our lifestyle, our stress, our physical activity, all of those kind of things do influence the risk of certain types of cancer and strokes and Alzheimer's disease and diabetes. So it all matters if we want to live a long and healthy and happy life. All right, my next question for you is to just kind of think about what do these conditions that I have listed on this slide, what could they possibly all have in common? Unfortunately, they all do have inflammation in common. So the word inflammation can actually be a little bit misleading, right? Because there are different types of inflammation. So if you have ever twisted your ankle or bruised your toe or, had an infection or cut your finger, you have experienced at least some of the 4 signs of inflammation. So it could be redness, it could be swelling, it could be pain, it could be heat. This is what is called acute inflammation, and it's our body's natural response to illness or injury or infection. So typically it resolves on its own, and it's our body's way of taking care of ourselves. Inflammation is an important part of our immune response. However, when inflammation continues to the point of being chronic, the risk for several major health conditions arises. So the slide that I just mentioned, what do all these conditions and diseases have in common? They all have in common something called systemic inflammation. So systemic inflammation is a chronic condition. It can persist for months or even years. So chronic systemic inflammation is a factor in the most common diseases and conditions, many of which I just mentioned earlier. But the common denominator here is the systemic inflammation. So you might be thinking, okay, systemic inflammation is not something that I want to be part of, and it's not something that I want my body to be challenged with. So what should we do? Thankfully, there is a lot of research to tell us that adopting an anti-inflammatory diet can help reduce the systemic inflammation. So there is a list of foods that can help lower your inflammation. And then there's also a list of foods, unfortunately, that can increase your level of inflammation inside your body. So when I help other clients and other patients gravitate towards more of an anti-inflammatory diet, we always begin with small, sustainable changes, because what I'm about to tell you might feel overwhelming. It might feel like, how am I going to do this all at once if I want to, live longer and happier and healthier and all of that? We don't do it all at once. We take small steps in the right direction. Slow and steady is the goal rather than quick and unsustainable. So we have to allow yourself some patience because the goal is never going to be perfection. I have a lot of people ask me, what is the best diet out there? I would say the best diet is the anti-inflammatory diet, but there is always a little bit of wiggle room. So we have to make sure that we don't get into that perfectionism mindset, because that can lead to getting on track and then off track and then on track and then off track. And that is very mentally and physically exhausting. All right, so far we have learned that inflammation is not something that we want to be a part of and not something that we want to deal with. So we want to do everything that we can to decrease our systemic inflammation inside our body. So knowing that inflammation is the trigger for so many chronic diseases and therefore so many deaths worldwide, the best diet for you would be one that aims to lower your inflammation. So the anti-inflammatory diet is somewhat of an umbrella term. The Mediterranean diet is under that umbrella term, the DASH diet, the MIND diet, the heart healthy diet. I mean, these are very similar styles of eating. Some of them have little nuances that are a little bit different, but overall, these are anti-inflammatory diets, and the whole goal is to reduce your inflammation and therefore reduce your chronic disease risk and increase your longevity. All right, so if you sat across from me at a table and you came to me and said, hey, I would like to eat healthier, I would like some help with knowing what to eat, what are the best foods to choose, I want some more energy, and quite frankly, I want to live a lot longer. I would say there are 5 different areas that we really need to start focusing on. The first area is really not going to be a surprise to you, I don't think. Of course, a registered dietitian is going to go ahead and encourage you to eat your fruits and veggies. But eating your fruits and veggies really is that important. These superfoods contain natural components called antioxidants and then also phytonutrients. These, I call them extra credit nutrients. These extra credit nutrients have been shown in research to help protect you against inflammation and therefore help reduce the risk of all those chronic diseases that I mentioned before. The second category that we would really need to focus on would be healthy fats. So back in the day, it was definitely encouraged to eat as low of a fat diet as possible, or even a fat-free diet. We can throw that all the way out the window because healthy fats are here to stay, and they have something called omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids provides us with so many different health benefits. So where can we get these omega-3 fatty acids? We can get them from fish, we can get them from nuts, we can get them from plant oils like flaxseed oil or canola oil. And then the third category that we really need to start focusing on is increasing your fiber intake. Most people in this country are not even coming close to the recommendation for fiber. Fiber is found in beans, all types of beans, legumes, whole grains, fruits and veggies, including the skin. And fiber has been known to lower the inflammatory marker C-reactive protein. So if you went to the doctor and they did some blood work and they were like, oh gosh, your CRP is pretty high, meaning that you have a high level of inflammation. What is the treatment? In my opinion, it's more fiber. We need more fiber to help lower that inflammatory marker. The C-reactive protein is a substance that's produced by the liver in response to inflammation. So how much do we need? 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day. And if you have no idea how much fiber you're having a day, I would definitely advise you to start keeping track. I think it's important to keep track of your intake when you're starting to adopt a healthier lifestyle anyway, because it really helps just bring awareness to what you're eating, when you're eating, how much you're eating. And at the end of the day, you can kind of look at the numbers. How much protein do you have a day? How much fiber do you have a day? How many calories do you have a day? And then once you collect that information about your own eating habits, you can then make changes based on the data that you collected. And then the final two areas that I would recommend focusing on right off the bat, if you're trying to make some healthy changes in your lifestyle, would be to begin cutting back on the salt intake and using herbs and spices in place of sodium. Specifically, curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, has been shown to reduce inflammation in developing research, as well as cinnamon, garlic, cayenne, and oregano. So eating a healthy anti-inflammatory diet doesn't have to be bland or boring. We can still use these exciting spices to help lower your inflammation. And then finally, green tea has been studied for years and years and years and years. It's a very well-known strategy for those who are trying to improve their cardiovascular health, as well as reducing the risk of cancer. So green tea is also helpful for lowering inflammation. It's important to know that we need to avoid green tea if you take something called warfarin. It's also important to know that if we're gonna have green tea, it can't be a green tea that has added sugar in it, because that will somewhat defeat the purpose of having green tea as an anti-inflammatory agent. So I mentioned that there are a list of foods that help reduce your inflammation, and then there's also, unfortunately, a list of foods and ingredients that can increase your inflammation. So these are called pro-inflammatory foods. So if we want to improve our health, reduce our inflammation, reduce our risk of disease, if we want to live longer, we have to know what the pro-inflammatory foods are and do our best to start to limit these foods. So what foods cause inflammation? Number one, I just mentioned this one, but unfortunately, added sugar. So sugar can be added to things that you may be kind of surprised about. Sugar can be added to condiments, it can be added to yogurt, it can be added to cereal, but I think the most well-known sources of added sugar would be regular soda, regular juice, sports drinks, pastries, dairy-based desserts, grain-based desserts. So anything that's going to be super sweet could have added sugar in it. Now, if something is super sweet, it could also have artificial sweeteners that are also not the best, especially for your gut health. The answer is not to then switch from added sugar to artificial sweeteners because there is going to be some concerns with that too. But I just want to mention that added sugar is a big source of inflammation. And then the second one is artificial trans fats. So artificial trans fats are added to processed foods to extend the shelf life, or trans fats are added to certain foods in order to influence the texture or the taste of a product. So for example, if you had something that was typically very high in fat, so maybe it's like blue cheese dressing, typically very high in fat. If a company wanted to make a fat-free blue cheese dressing, there's going to have to be a lot of things that are altered and added in order to mimic what the real blue cheese dressing is going to taste like and look like and feel like and all of that. Consuming trans fats has been shown in research to increase the inflammatory markers in blood. So there is no safe recommended amount of trans fats. So it's very important to know where trans fats might be found. So we need to look at the ingredients label. Anything that comes from a package, a jar, it's going to be a package, a jar, a can, a bag, anything that you open in order to, get the food. There's going to be a food label and an ingredients list. On that ingredients list, we want to make sure that we don't see partially hydrogenated oil because that's going to represent trans fat. All right. So the third category of pro-inflammatory foods is going to be the refined grains and refined carbohydrates. So the main dietary sources of refined carbs are going to be white flour, white bread, white rice, white pasta, and then processed snack foods as well. Many cereals, pastries, and grain-based desserts like cake, cookies, pie, all of those kind of things are made with refined grains that have sugar added. Okay, so what we're looking for is, number one, instead of added sugar, we're looking for natural sugars. Number two, artificial trans fats, we want to throw them out the window altogether. Number three, instead of refined grains and carbohydrates, we want to adopt whole grains, and that's where we're going to get the fiber that I mentioned earlier. Finally, processed meat is also considered a pro-inflammatory food category. However, there is a really huge variety in processed meat products. Like, not all of them are going to be increasing your inflammation. Not all of them are going to have the same ingredients and the same amounts. But the most common types of processed meat is going to be sausage, bacon, ham, hot dogs, salami, bologna, canned meat, and beef jerky. All right, so in just a minute, we're going to open up the floor so I can answer any questions that you have on a more individualized basis. I want to make sure that when you leave this presentation, you feel confident in knowing how to make changes in your diet and how to adopt a healthier lifestyle in order to decrease your inflammation and live a long, happy, and healthy life. But in order to do that, there is a very important piece that we cannot ignore and we can't overlook. So that piece is mindful eating. So we talked about the certain foods that help lower our inflammation and why that's important. We talked about the foods that unfortunately can increase systemic inflammation. We talked about why it all matters. We talked about what is the result of living with chronic inflammation. And now we're going to talk about how we're eating, because what we're eating is just as important as how we're eating. So if you live in a very fast-paced, chronically stressed lifestyle in a world where food is available at any time, at any place, mindless eating can easily become a way of life. Especially if you have a history of chronic dieting, it's very possible to simply lose touch with your internal signals that are telling you, hey, I'm full, it's time to stop eating. So some tips for mindful eating that I have would be limit distractions. And this doesn't mean that we have to eat in silence. I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine too. But the goal is not to eat on autopilot. So when we're eating on autopilot, we are not paying attention to what the food tastes like, our portion sizes, our pace of eating, and all of that really makes a big difference as far as our digestion goes, but also our body weight goes, because all of that can contribute how much we're eating, and therefore it can contribute to influencing your body weight. So it's important to stay in the present moment when it's time to eat. When you savor your food and really chew thoroughly and really enjoy your food, you may be surprised at what happens on the other side of that. Begin to pay attention to your food and how your body is feeling regarding hunger and fullness. Slow down your pace of eating. And mindful eating is an important strategy for portion control, like I mentioned before. It's important for meal satisfaction, and it's important for your digestion. So mindful eating is not defined as a diet per se, but it's more of a way of eating. So 9 times out of 10, if I work with a client or a patient and they're complaining of bloating and indigestion and even like acid reflux and burping and just overall feeling like they have a lot of gut health issues, the first strategy that we talk about is mindful eating, because it makes a world of a difference for so many different things. All right, I hope that you got something out of this presentation. I hope that you leave here knowing how you can lower your inflammation and why that's so important. At this time, it is time for you to speak your mind. If you have any questions that you're hoping to get answered that I did not cover, now's your time to ask anything regarding individualized nutrition or anything just on any topic that is not in the realm of anti-inflammatory eating. That is fine too. Thank you guys so much again, and I will talk to you soon.